Hello, I'm Mr. Nikola Kosi, equal to Master Graduate of Law, with over 10 years of social studies teaching experience. For the last 3 years, I've been teaching geography and human geography at Kantja International School in Xi'an. Thank you for watching this demonstration class I made for Advanced College Credit Pathway program. Let me start by introducing the version of the syllabus I have designed. It's an altered version from the last year's course. I decided not to change it too much and to adopt the regional approach done last year as well, even though I am more inclined to do the thematic approach when teaching human geography. You will see that there are differences because this is a fully offline classroom course, while the course done last year was a synchronous online course. There are differences in evaluation, there are differences in course order. I want to go with all 14 sections instead of only 10. Some differences in format and expectations, but I will submit this syllabus together with this PowerPoint and video, so I will not spend any more time in explaining it. As you can see, attendance and participation are included in the final grade. Also, there is a makeup policy that is probably more lenient than it was last year, since the students will have me available every day for most of the day. Also, there is a classroom behavior policy since they are in the classroom, and also they are still high school students, grade 12. The content I've decided to cover in this demonstration lesson is from the very beginning, from chapter 1, Concepts of Geography, the first half of the chapter, since it contains a plethora of very important concepts that the students need to understand if they're going to fully grasp everything from the 13 following chapters, as well as for me to show you my instruction methods and my expertise. So the first half of the chapter 1 Concepts of Geography in Marquette recommended textbook is Globalization and Population. Since this is human geography, the first thing I would do in the lesson where basic concepts of geography are introduced is to show them this collage of 4 world maps with the definition of ecumen, and then I would ask them, what can they notice? What is so important here? Before every lesson, students are expected to finish reading the chapter or part of the chapter that is going to be covered in the lesson. In this case, it's pages 4 to 27 in Diversity Amid Globalization textbook, and after reading that, they should be able to identify the reason why ecumen grows is the increase in population and improvements in technology. Also, to check whether they had done the pre-reading, there would be a little pre-reading entry quiz to every lesson at the beginning of every lesson, not longer than 5 minutes, with covering only the key concepts that are going to be covered in that particular lesson. Also, because this is the first lesson and they have a lot of knowledge taken from high school, the pre-reading entry quiz is just going to cover the basic geographic tools, the knowledge of basic geographic tools. For this lesson, the pre-reading entry quiz content is about location, maps, remote sensing and aerial photos, and geographic information systems. Here are some entry quiz example questions like true or false, multiple choice questions, short answer questions, and some figure recognition questions, like in this case would be which geographer's tool is presented in the figure. These questions can vary from true or false to MCQ or short answer questions. Of course, the first thing to let students know is who invented geography, that it was invented in ancient Greece by Eratosthenes of Cyrene, and what it means. This is something they should already know. However, it should be reviewed that geo means earth and graphia means writing, recording, describing, that geographia actually means description of earth. And then, of course, a little reminder of 2 major branches of geography, the one that focuses on physical features and the one that focuses on human interactions among humans or humans with physical features of the environment. All the time while presenting the slides and giving the lecture, students are expected to participate actively. Most of the question, most of the content, most of the material, I expect them to tell me, not me to tell them, unless it's something more complicated. However, in this first lesson, most of the concepts should be answered by them after the pre-reading fairly easily. Like, for example, thematic and regional geography, what is the difference, and then they would be asked whether our course is done in a thematic or systematic approach or the regional approach. It should be a fairly easy question for them to understand. And here we can see the map of the world's regions that are going to be covered in this course. One of, if not the most important concept of geography is that it is a spatial science, and the students need to understand that. And I would go with a few questions to see whether they understand that there are two views of spatial in geography, like differentiation and integration. It doesn't matter that much for them to understand, to know these words, how important it is to understand that geography examines how regions or parts of the Earth's surface differ from one another and how they interact with one another. And this areal differentiation integration is done at different scales of analysis. By showing these two maps to students, I expect them to understand why and how scales of analysis matter in geography. In map A, state of Illinois has the population density of 62 to 130 people per square kilometer, but that doesn't mean that every part of state Illinois is equally densely populated, as it can be seen in map B, that the metropolitan area of the city of Chicago is by far the most densely populated area in state of Illinois. And there are some rural areas with much less density, like even 7 population or less. This is where I would want them to understand how important scales of analysis are in geography. Then on this next slide, it comes to some few definitions related to space and spatial. Even though there is not one unambiguous definition of geographic space, there are differences between location and space, between place and location, and what cultural landscape is. For location, place, and space, most students should know the answers even without pre-reading. However, cultural landscape, unless they have learned AP Human Geography before, they probably will be introduced to this concept for the first time. I would spend a little bit more time in explaining this one. And I would do that by showing them this beautiful photo. They should be able to see that this little community is dependent on the lake it is found on, that it is a mountainous region, which religion is present. You can see the churches, the architecture. This is all cultural landscape. I would go maybe a few minutes in asking questions about this photo and hearing their understanding through their answers. Here is another concept that most students should be acquainted with, the region. And then there is 3 types of geographic regions that are studied, and how the regions can be defined at various scales. And I would then ask them how many world's regions are included in this course. Even though there are 3 types of regions, formal and functional regions are fairly easy to grasp what they are, while perceptual or cognitive vernacular region is not. Even though they are Chinese students, I would go with the map of North America to try and explain to them that vernacular region is the region what every person thinks it is. And the best example for that is the American South. And then after these several important concepts, we come to the most important concept, at least from this textbook. It's the globalization. And this is where I would start to introduce their first assignment. Then I will talk a little bit more later on. So I would want them to know what globalization is, what is the driving force of globalization, uh, how space-time compression affects globalization, or how globalization actually is the product of space-time compression, and how it causes serious environmental problems throughout the world. Next, it comes to how globalization changes human geographies, how it changes cultural practices, how it influences population movements, what type of flows there are. The term globalization, how globalization is influenced by locale. This is one of the best examples of stimulus diffusion, where the idea stays the same, but the final cultural practice is a little bit different. McDonald's is a fast food restaurant that originally serves beef burgers in the United States, 100% beef patties. Beef patties cannot be served in India since most Hindi people consider cows as holy animals. So what did the McDonald's franchise owner do? They've changed the product. The product is not beef patties anymore. It's still a hamburger in in a bun, but what they serve is vegetarian burger, chicken, or fish. Next, following the explanation of localization, I would go with asking them a lot of questions like what would it mean that globalization is not restricted by territorial or national boundaries, and I would ask them what do they think, whether globalization has weakened or strengthened the political power of individual states. I would like to hear both opinion or even more if they have them, and then we would have a class discussion about that. Despite all this being in the textbook, I would ask them to close every material they have, and we would brainstorm to see what economic globalization actually means. The assignment for this lesson, for next lesson, and probably after the lecture, it would be done during the class where I can give them feedback while they're doing it, would be to write a short essay about globalization, diversity, and these uneven development outcomes. For this first assignment, they would be asked to take a stand. Are they pro-globalist, anti-globalist, or they are taking the middle position? And at all times, they need to consider diversity. Is it increasing or decreasing in globalizing world? Even though the obvious answer is that it is decreasing, students can still have different opinions. Also, they can have the opinions whether this is a positive or negative outcome. At the end of the lecture, the assignment will be thoroughly explained with all the requirements. Now we would move on to the next topic after globalization, and it is the population, and it starts with population distribution. They would learn what population distribution means, actually learn for the first time what ecumen is. That ecumen collage of maps was just at the very beginning too, because it's human geography, like one thing to introduce human geography to them. And then I would tell them something that they should already know. That's what is the world population currently and how it's forecasted to increase by 2050 to almost 10 billion people. Then I would show them the worldometer.info website, where we would look at this page and we would analyze the numbers seen here, because these numbers are going to be explained in the continuation of the lesson. This is another instance where I would tell them to close all the materials, where we would brainstorm some main points about the population, and I would want them to remember these few that are listed in the textbook. Next, we would review the concept of population density, and I would introduce three different methods of calculating density. They all know about the arithmetic density. Some of them would know about physiological density, but very few would know about agricultural density. And then I would ask them for their opinions, whether it matters what type of density, what method of density is used to calculate it. And the example for physiological density is usually given in the country of Egypt, with the country of Egypt and enormous density around River or Nile, and almost no population in the rest of the country because it's all Sahara Desert. For the same reason, I would use this map to introduce physiological density, and I would want to hear their opinions on what they can see and what they can analyze in this map. They can also talk about their own country, because China has a very high physiological density, while arithmetic density, even though it is more than double of the world's average, even triple, it is not that high. And then we come to population dynamics, what rate of natural increase is, how it's calculated, what is birth rate, what is death rate, what doubling time is, how it's calculated. This is all revision from what they learned in grade 11. However, it is very important and it needs to be covered, reviewed in class this year again. Also, total fertility rate, how it's been reduced in the world, why they think it's not 2 but 2.1, and in some instances even goes up to 2.3. I would like to hear their opinions on this. And then again, their opinions on this very interesting graph that shows the population dynamics in the last 10,000 years. Now, population, age structure, and sex ratio and population pyramids. This is something that hasn't been done extensively in grade 11. So this needs thorough analysis, explanation. I would want them to know. I would want them to be able to read the population pyramid, and I would ask them to give me their own opinions on why standard biological sex ratio for humans is 105 male babies for every 100 female babies. I expect many interesting answers to this question. And here are several opportunities for the students to practice their reading of population pyramids, with some interesting ones like the State College in Pennsylvania or Sun City West in Arizona. I would want them to understand why there is such a huge number of people in certain cohorts. I think they would be able to understand it easily. Also, what it means if the population pyramid has a broad base or a very broad top of the pyramid. Life expectancy is the next concept that they should understand. It's a fairly easy one, not too much time would be spent on it, but what is important about it is how can life expectancy be used, and it is a very useful measure of development. For every student who hasn't studied AP Human Geography, this would be a new concept, and it is demographic transition model, the most important demographic model, and it's 5 stages. This diagram is definitely something that we would spend a few minutes on in discussing and me explaining. They should be able to understand how first the birth rate and death rate are very high, then how death rate goes down, then how birth rate also goes down, and then why in stage 5 it's actually a decline in the population. But more importantly, I would want them to understand why models are used in human geography, in social sciences, even though they are very often being criticized. I would like to hear their opinions on that as well. Just as population can change, increase or decrease naturally, it can increase or decrease due to migration. I would show them this photo and ask them who these people are, where this photo was taken, and why they are migrating, it should be straightforward that these are Ukrainian refugees in Poland, because all of that can be seen and recognized, easily identified in the photo. However, another question I would ask them, and I would want a very straightforward, quick answer, is whether they are forced, whether this is an example of forced or voluntary migration. We would come to why migration is that important today in particular, since the dawn of humanity, people have migrated, but nowadays, today, more people live outside the country of their birth than ever before. Why that is? So we have voluntary migration, and then we have forced migration and refugees and internally displaced persons, something that they need to know. And just as with natural increase rates, there are net migration rates, how they're expressed, how they're calculated, something fairly easy to grasp. Then I would show them these two maps for us to analyze as a class and discuss a little bit like the results of migration in Europe and the United States, with few interesting questions like why do you think Germany has higher migration than any other country, and why some of the states like Texas, Florida, California, and New York have the highest number of immigrants. And then last but not least, when we talk about migration, is the greatest migration in human history, rural to urban migration. Since 2007, more people in the world live in cities than, for the first time, more people live in cities than in rural areas. The results of this migration as metacities and megacities and metacities, how much of the world's population is urbanized today, why do cities attract migrants, all this will be covered later on, but like this is a very good place to introduce all these, let's call them concepts. But rural to urban migration is the largest migration in the history of humanity, and even without reading the figure sources Mumbai Mirror, the students should be able to identify that this is the Ravi, one of the most populous slums in the world, in Mumbai, because of a case study done in grade 11 extensively, where they analyzed push and pull factors and the results of push and pull factors related to the cities. This is where lecture would be over. I expect them to have about 15 to 20 minutes, maybe even a little bit more, to start their essays with me guiding them on what and how to write. It should be 350 words at least, and they need to take a stand about globalization, including the diversity point of view. They need to think critically and write this essay. This is where I would emphasize, stress that they cannot use any AIs in writing. The first time they will lose half of the merit. Later on, if they repeat this, they will probably lose the entire merit. 80% of the essay would be graded labor-based, just completion. If they wrote 350 words on the topic, 80%, and then how well their knowledge, skills, and understanding are displayed in the essay would be additional 20%. Finally, in the last minute of the class, I would assign the reading for pre-reading for the next lesson. In this case, it would be pages 27 to 45 in Diversity and Globalization textbook, and remind them about the pre-reading entry quiz at the beginning of the next lesson to check whether they had read it or not. My name is Mr. Nikola Kosi, and thank you for watching this demonstration class video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback anytime soon. Bye.